Good morning, everyone. My name is Alan Olage. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing at Scilligence Corporation. I have a background in medicinal chemistry, so I did drug discovery for 18 years as a medicinal bench chemist in early stage lead identification and late stage lead optimization. And it's my pleasure to present to you our ELN Final Report capabilities as an add-on to our existing electronic lab notebook module. So for today's agenda, I'm going to cover the need for a final report, the challenges that arise when you have such a need, the benefits of an electronic lab notebook, and then in particular our Scilligence ELN, and then of course the final report details and benefits. After that, I'm going to go into a very brief demonstration highlighting how it's used, and then we'll be more than happy to answer any questions and comments. So why do we need a final report? Where did this idea come from? What we've noticed in the industry is many milestones can occur at different corporations. So for example, if you're in the drug discovery field, you can have a situation where multiple lead series are identified, or there may be a deadline for a patent application that's quickly approaching. And so now your team is tasked with capturing all the experimental and analytical data for either a lead series or several lead series. And you want to hand it over to your patent lawyer for review to make sure that you're able to proceed with a specific scaffold or lead series. Alternatively, you could also be an academic laboratory where you want to publish your recent breakthroughs, or perhaps a graduate student is drafting a thesis in order for them to graduate and hopefully get a job in the industry. So what you want to be able to do is gather the information that you've acquired throughout the research as quickly and efficiently as possible. Another situation where there's a need for a final report is the production of synthetic reports. One end of it is from the pharma biotech side. If you want to produce guidance for a CRO that you're hiring, perhaps you want to show them a multi-step synthetic route that you've developed that's quite efficient. Maybe you want to share reaction conditions for each step, or just provide guidance for them so that you know that the compounds or set of compounds that they're going to make will be efficient and will be delivered on time. You will also have a need to publish a synthetic report quickly and efficiently. On the other side, if you are the CRO and you want to provide updates to your client, you also want to be able to share a specific synthetic report. Perhaps your team has established an optimized route, or your client is asking for progress updates, or perhaps you've wrapped up your synthesis and you want to provide a final update on what it took to create the final compound and the synthetic steps. So as you can see, there are quite a lot of needs for generating synthetic reports or for scouring all of the information and analytical information for these chemical reactions and synthetic routes. So what are the challenges of trying to do such a task? The biggest one is disorganized data. Drafting a synthetic report, it can be time consuming and tedious. If you are not using an electronic lab notebook, let's say you're using a paper-based lab notebook, or even maybe an ELN, you have to manually sort through several experiments and try to decipher what's been written. Oftentimes, it's not just one notebook that you have to sort through. It's usually a team effort. So that means that somebody has to browse through multiple notebooks to accumulate this data. Also, we need to take into consideration the analytical data that is generated with these experiments. After you've filtered and isolated the optimal experiments, the experiments with the optimal yields, now we have to look at their analytical data, the NMR reports, the LCMS reports, because that needs to be captured as well, especially if you're doing a publication or a patent application. So all of this is quite time consuming. Not only that, oftentimes it needs to be rewritten in a harmonized fashion. Oftentimes scientists have their own way of writing procedures. And when you're going to generate a report, you have to organize and harmonize the way that this is written in order for you to either be able to publish it or submit an application or just have a neat looking final report. All right. And so again, one of the challenges is you're also pulling data from many different sources, as is exemplified in the picture at the bottom. It can be quite time consuming. So this next slide kind of addresses the challenges of this time sink, right? The previous slide showed the disorganized data accumulation and procurement, but then it doesn't take into consideration how long this takes. So in this fictional timeline that we have drafted here, we can start off from the procurement of notebooks from different researchers. Let's assume the role of somebody that has to take over and is taking on this task of drafting a synthetic report without our final report option. Gathering this information, just the notebooks from researchers in your project or your team, can take anywhere from 2 to 5 days, and roughly a week to identify the optimal procedures, right? So you're scouring through different notebooks, you've identified the different set of reactions, and now you want to see which ones had the highest yield or perhaps the best analytical data or best purification methods. Now, once you've identified that, you also have to gather the analytical data that's associated with these compounds. If you're lucky enough to have an electronic lab notebook, that often is associated with the experiment page. If you're unlucky and you're dealing with paper-based notebooks, that can be quite time-consuming. In this estimate, we assume 1 to 2 weeks of analytical data gathering, especially if you're harmonizing the type of analytical data that you want to use. And then maybe 3 to 4 days to rewrite and harmonize everything that everybody else has written. And let's give it another 2 days to meet up with senior management and do a document cleanup and review. So overall, it can take days or perhaps weeks for you to generate a synthetic report, right? And this is cost prohibitive. It's a waste of time and resources. And it's also time away from the labs. You really do take away from your team's productivity by saddling them with this type of initiative. So one of our solutions, or one of these solutions that can help mitigate the pain point of drafting a synthetic report, is to simply go from a paper-based notebook to an electronic lab notebook. Adopting this is a very good step towards improving the efficiency. Typically, the advantages are that from paper-based to electronic, you have a standardized format, you have a structured workflow, and you also have a database of experiments that you can quickly sort through, rather than going from notebook to notebook and searching as need be. However, there are some drawbacks. Not every lab notebook is the same. Some ELNs can be disjointed or perhaps not organized as you'd like them to be. The reaction paths may not be easy to follow. It's not easily mapped. And some ELNs have limited searching capabilities. So rather than scraping the entire database, it could be painful clicking experiment by experiment to try to identify the reaction that you've done. Again, this depends on the lab notebook that you're using. I'm sorry, the ELN that you're currently using. For those of you who have our Scilligence electronic lab notebook, this is a vast improvement over the others, right? So with our Scilligence ELN, the entire ELN database can be searched with our advanced search feature. So that's already an advantage. You can go ahead and scrape the whole database across projects, across teams, and search for specific scaffolds, or perhaps for a specific final product by utilizing these indexing features. Another thing is you can rapidly find a desired synthetic route. We have something called reaction path in our ELN that quickly shows you a multi-step synthesis and maps out the synthetic route. And then it allows you to link multi-step reactions. So this is with our ELN. And the experimental procedure and write-up can be harmonized. We have a feature called the recipe feature in our single-step reaction that allows you to have a standardized write-up that is simply populated by the reactants that you're generating with each experiment. So rather than copying and pasting, which can lead to human error, this will automatically populate the reaction write-up for you, and all that it will do is update any differences that you're doing in this experiment. So it's a quite efficient and easy feature for reactions that are often repeated or done to generate different analogs. Another advantage is that analytical data is captured at the experiment level. So when you're drafting an experiment in our Scilligence ELN, you can quickly upload NMR data, LCMS data, any images that you need, TLC data, et cetera. And that's captured at the experiment level. There's no need to store that in a separate notebook or perhaps in a separate folder within your own desktop. Okay. So this brings us to the ultimate solution, which is ELN Final Report. With ELN Final Report, this is an add-on to our existing Scilligence electronic lab notebook. Here, you're able to gather all the synthetic route details for the final product in a concise report. So it gathers it for you. You can draft multiple routes and steps. Oftentimes, there's no one way to get to a final route. Teams usually explore or experiment with an optimal synthetic procedure to try to get the best yield or perhaps the best purity. And you can also refine your search within the ELN Final Report. So if you only want to search for the optimal yields and select those, you can do so and gather them in a final report to share. The database you can also create a database of final reports that can be shared with your team. So rather than having to send them out or emailing them as a PDF, which of course you can simply send a link to a team member and say, this is the final report that I've already generated within the ELN, and they can quickly have access to it to view it. And again, I'll show you this in the demo. And in the end, as I mentioned in the previous examples for the pain points, this can be exported as a PDF or as a Word document, either to share with a CRO, or if you're a CRO, to share with your client, or if you're an academic institution, you can generate this for your PI, or if you're filing a patent application, this can be shared with your legal department for review. So the benefits of this is pretty much the reduction of time, the efficiency. You can go from something that takes weeks and draft something in minutes. Rather than spending all that time accessing, sourcing, looking, harmonizing procedures, it can be reduced within minutes of searching. So what I'd like to do now is I'm going to jump over to Final Report and just quickly show you something that's already been established, so you can have a sense of how easy it is to access, to generate a final report. Okay. Now, Shirley and Joanna, I'm going to depend on you to ensure that I'm sharing the right screen. So right now, you should be able to see my browser. It's on Firefox, and it should be in the demo site of our ELN. Can one of you confirm?
Yes, that's what we see.
Perfect. So for those of you who are already existing clients of our Scilligence ELN, this should look rather familiar. For those of you who are not, we'd be more than happy to give you a demo and to showcase our ELN at a later date. But for now, I'm going to assume that most of our audience is already familiar with our ELN. Final Report is nestled under the Explore tab of our electronic lab notebook, and you will click on the Final Report section. What this will do is this will bring you to a screen that'll have already created final reports. This is the database that I was talking about earlier. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to simply click on this one that Jim has already generated for me called CVFM synthesis. If I click on this eyeball, I can quickly see a preview of the final report. And this is what I was talking about. So sorry, let me just go back really quickly because I also want to generate something in real time. Allow me to duplicate this tab. And what I'll do is I will view this final report, but I will also search in order to walk you through an existing final report. The one that I will search contains this thiazole substructure, and I will go ahead and scrape the database for any reaction that contains a thiazole substructure. While that's searching, I can go back and walk you through an already created final report and show you the details of it. So in this preview section, we have the structure that was searched. In this case, this was the final structure that we're asking our ELN Final Report add-on to look for. And what it did is it gave me a final route. I believe this is a 7-step synthesis, starting from the initial starting material all the way to the final compound. And you can see that every step has its own not only yield percentage, but also the reactants that were used to generate the intermediate all the way to the final product. As I scroll down, I can tell each experiment that was used in this final route. So the first step is exemplified by the Notebook 73 experiment 120. It'll give me the amount of starting material and then the yield of the product as, I'm sorry, the amount of the final product that was generated, as well as the percentage of the yield and the purity percentage. As I scroll down, I can see all of the steps that were quickly gathered for me by this scraping mechanism that lets me identify the yields, the amounts, and the purity percentage of each step. Okay, and as always, you can save this as a Word document or save it as a PDF file. Now, this is a preview of the final report. What I'm doing in the other tab is I'm going to show you step by step how it's generated. Let's say, for example, that I want to generate a final report for this final product. If you remember, earlier on, I searched for just this thiazole substructure. And what this did is it generated, it allowed me to look at all of the products that contain this thiazole substructure. I want to choose this product to generate a final report. What did I use to get to this final product? I select this product and I click on Next. And now it'll scrape the entire server and start searching for all of the reactions that were used to create this final product. If you remember, in the final report, oh, I logged out of it. In the final report that I was using for CVFM synthesis, it was a 7-step synthesis, and it searched all of the reactions that were necessary to create that final product. Since it's searching the entire database, it usually takes under a minute, maybe 30 to 45 seconds to search the database for the reaction. So as you can see, not minutes, seconds. As you can see, now it's identified all of the routes that that have been used to create this final product. In this case, there are 2 routes that have been identified. The first route has a maximum yield of 65.8%. The second route has a lower yield of 46.2%. Let's say I'm interested in the higher yielding route. So I'm going to go ahead and select this route and click on Next. As I click on Next, this pop-up window will show me, okay, this is the structure that you're looking for. This is the route that you've selected. And now these are the experiments that we've identified for each route. So for example, the very first step in this reaction contains actually 2 experiments. And in step 1 of these 2 experiments, experiment 284 has the highest yield with the same purity. So I'm going to go ahead and select this preferred experiment out of the 2 that was identified in ELN Final Report. In step 2, there was only 1 experiment that was found. That's fine. We can select the sole experiment. And at step 3, again, I have the choice of choosing between a high yield, high purity experiment or a lower yield and slightly lower purity experiment. Again, I'm going to choose the highest yield and the highest purity experiment. This searching would take a long time if you were doing this by a paper-based notebook, or if you had to individually click on each experiment or perhaps each notebook as you were searching through it. You notice how the ELN Final Report has already compiled this for you. For the final couple of steps, I'm going to go ahead and just click the highest yielding experiment. As you can see in the 5th step of the multi-step synthesis, I'll select experiment 297 because that has the highest yield as well as the highest purity. And then once I've selected each experiment for the multi-step synthesis, I click on the Next button. And now it's compiled the report for me. It shows me the structure of the final compound that I wanted to look for. It shows me the entire synthetic route based on its database search. And it gets more granular and shows me the experiment details that I'm looking for that I chose. In this case, it's almost a table of contents of the highest yielding and the highest purity experiments. Now I can save this report, or I can also save it as a Word document or save it as a PDF file. For now, I'll save the report into the ELN so it's saved as a database. It'll give me a pop-up window saying that the final report has been saved successfully. If I close out of this window, I now have a saved report. I can always view the report if I highlight it, and it'll show me a quick view. And I also have the option of saving as a PDF or as a Word document. So as you can see, this feature was meant to save time and to make things more efficient rather than the alternative which would be to go through each notebook and click on each section to see what you made, the highest yields, etc. It does it for you. Okay. And that's pretty much it. Are there any questions, anything that you'd like for us to answer, anything I may have missed? It's really pretty straightforward, and we're very proud of this add-on for our ELN. We think it'll help a lot of people save time in conducting a final report or a final synthesis report. If you already have our ELN, that's great. It'll be a very smooth transition to work with this add-on. And if you don't have our ELN and you're currently using another ELN and facing this pain point, we'd be more than happy to give you a focus demo with an example or several examples of how this can benefit you and improve your efficiency. So part of Scilligence's strengths are working with the client to fit your needs, your workflows, and your business needs. So we're more than happy to sit down with you and figure out what you need and ensure that the end result is exactly what you're looking for, and it makes your life simpler, easier, and more efficient. I thank you for your time. As always, feel free to reach out to us, to our team, with any questions you may have thought of after the webinar. We will send out videos of this webinar to our participants, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, everyone.